Welcome to my channel. I'm one of those people that have always liked making lists about anything and everything and systemizing my thoughts. So in this video, I've sort of tried to systemize my thoughts around my Nordic reads. So in this one, it's about my top 10 favorite Nordic reads. And a little disclaimer, I am Norwegian, so the majority of these reads will be Norwegian. I'm sorry. And the first one is no exception, but it is one that I was wondering about. Did it really belong on this list or not? And it's Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. So Sigrid Undset is of course a Nobel Prize for Literature winner and a Norwegian. And this is her big statement, I would say. It's about Kristin and all the stupid choices she makes and the society she has to live with. The reason why this is on the list, I believe, to me is the first book, so it's split into three, and the first book is really great. It's fun living in Oslo and reading about all these places, historical places in this city, and how she has recreated the whole thing. Also, this is 1100 pages, so if you've spent the time reading the 1100 pages, it will stay with you for quite some time. Going into this, I thought it would be just another forceful read, something I just had to get through, but I really did enjoy the first book. Didn't enjoy the second one as much, but then enjoyed the third one. So all in all, I feel like this belongs on the list. The next one is a short one, and it's the debut trilogy by Helga Flatland, also Norwegian, and the titles are impossible to remember. This one is called Stay If You Can, Go If You Want, Stay If You Can, Travel If You Must, or something along those lines, and the two other titles are similarly difficult to read, or to remember at least. But these books are about three boys traveling to Afghanistan and not coming back, and all the people in the town they live in, like, grieving in all different ways. So you get a lot of different perspectives. So in the first book you have four main characters, and then in the next two books you also have, I think, four main characters. But the way these books describe pain and grief and all the different kinds and how they affect the society around them, I was just mesmerized and I couldn't really put them down. I was really surprised because I read one of Helga Flatland's books from before and that wasn't great at all. I didn't really like it. So my surprise going into these ones was kind of huge. I would say what worked for me is how well I could recognize myself in a lot of the characters without thinking I would ever get there, but I could see how I would end up in a similar situation, and it's just painful and beautiful. There's a lot of love in this. It's not all like pain, I would say. Then over to a Norwegian classic, and it's The Ice Palace by Tarjei Vesaas. So this one has grown on me after I read it. It's about these two young girls that only meet for one evening, but after that evening one of them disappears and the other girl's world is shattered. So this one meeting has meant the world to her. And the encounter they're describing was so powerful that I just had to put the book down and like reflect over it. It's like it's emotions described in a way that I've never before like felt in the same way. When reading about this, I saw somewhere that his writing in this is described as lyrical economy. This is a really short read. The font size is huge and there are not a lot of pages, but it's so profound that I found myself just like dwelling on the words, really reflecting heaps more than I usually do when I read. I'm not the kind of reader that stops and thinks. I just want to progress. That's not a compliment to myself, but it's a huge compliment to Tarjei Vesaas that makes me want to pause and think about his writing. So Tarjei Vesaas has been one of my favorite authors throughout the last 3 years, and this remains to be one of my favorites of his. I found one thing to be really curious when making this list, and that is how much the human connection means to these stories. So that isn't really something I'm looking for when choosing reads in general, but when reading Nordic books, it's apparent that that's important, the conversation between people and how they're feeling. So there will be a lot of emotion in this top 10. And the next one is no exception. It's Every Day We Should Be So Brave by Brynjulf Jung Tjønn. It's about a small boy that's neglected by his mother, where he basically does everything that she should be doing, and we get an insight into what he's thinking and feeling about his own life. And what struck me was how precise I believe this book to be. It's impossible to say, but I was just mesmerized by how well I could see myself in that young boy. Both in the things he does and how he interacts with others, it feels very much like what a small boy could be doing. And I was impressed by how accurate it felt. So this is a tearjerker. It's a sad story, but it's also beautiful. I think that goes for a lot of these books, I guess. This next one is kind of different and from Iceland. It's Hotel Silence by Auður Ólafsdóttir. So this is about a 49-year-old man. He wants to end it all, commit suicide, but instead he travels to this war-torn area. So this is a place where the war has been raging for a long time, but it's now over, and they're in the process of rebuilding the country. And he thinks, well, I can go there, and if I'm killed, well, that won't really matter. But instead he ends up helping them with stuff. So this Hotel Silence is where he helps them with handyman stuff, because he is really handy. And I don't think I'm going to say more. I just found the premise to be hilarious. I really enjoyed the writing, and just the story was great. So a kind of a different book, and if you're into this kind of morbid humor, I think you'll enjoy this one. It also won the Nordic Prize for Literature, so more people than I like it. Then over to one that many of you probably know, and it's Swedish. It's A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. Fredrik Backman, of course, being one of my favorite authors by now, and this is maybe his most famous novel, also recently made into a movie in the US with Tom Hanks, so it will probably sell a whole lot more now. But anyway, Ove is a retired man, and he's a really pedantic man. He likes things the way they've always been, and people don't view him as really lovable, I guess. But one day he gets new neighbors, and his life is turned quite around. And it's so much fun. Ove is a brilliant character that you really hate and love. I think this is the story I've read with the most character development, where it goes from a guy you don't really like to a guy you can't live without. And with all Fredrik Backman's books, you get an attachment to the people and they're recognizable, but this is also just really, really funny. And I laughed out loud several times. That doesn't really happen that much when I read books, and yeah, love it. Next on the list is the book that was probably my favorite growing up, and it's The Beatles by Lars Christensen, or just Beatles. It's about 4 young boys in Oslo growing up listening to Beatles in the 60s, and we get to follow along for the journey. So this is actually the first of 3 books where you get to watch the boys grow up, but the first one is definitely the best. The reason why this is on the list is because I read it at the right time. We were about the same age. They grew up in the 60s. I wished that I grew up in the 60s, and I really wanted all the things they had. So I was sort of just jealous of the boys in the book, just sitting around the record player, listening to music, and then doing all kinds of stuff in between. They were really relatable, and they had what I wanted. So that helps. Of course, it's also well written. I've read several of Lars Christensen's books, and I like many of them, but this is surely my favorite. And the reason being that I wanted to be them, I guess. But nevertheless, it's a great novel about growing up. That's the central theme. Then we've come to our bronze medalist, and it's Summerlight and Then Comes the Night by Jon Kalman Stefánsson. It's about this small town on Iceland, and we get to meet the locals. You have the whack jobs and the other sort of crazy people. Then you have the normal kind that does normal stupid shit, and you just feel like you're a part of this town, and it's just beautiful. I feel like this is one of those that's a bit difficult to explain. sort of, you have this person looking at the stars, and you feel like through this character that you're sort of looking at this place from above, but at the same time as you're there. And I feel like it's written in a way that makes you feel a lot of compassion with the people, and that's what makes it for me, I guess. And at number 2 we have The Birds by Tarjei Vesaas. This is probably his most famous novel, and it's so beautiful. It's about Mattis. He's not like everyone else. He can talk to birds, but he doesn't talk to humans that well. All in all, he's different, and we get to see the world through his eyes and him discovering sort of himself through this book. And it's heartbreaking, but it's also so well written. And as with the Ice Palace, I just dwell on the words in this one as well. And yeah, I read this when I went to school as a child. Did not enjoy it at all, but I guess it's kind of silly introducing this book to people at a very young age. There's so much written in between the lines that makes this story great. And yeah, if you should read one Norwegian book, I suggest you read this one. Then over to my favorite read last year, and it's Beartown by Fredrik Backman. So this is about a small town in Sweden where everything revolves around the hockey team. I think there are 17-year-olds, and the whole society is just built up around this hockey team, and yeah, there's nothing else to do there. So either you're in the hockey team or you're on the outskirts of society, I guess. And this is a part of a series, a trilogy. I've only read the first novel, but it made me I've never been more angry when reading a book before. And it's the way Fredrik Backman just toys with your emotions and knows exactly what to write to make you sad, angry, or happy. And it's infuriating at times, but it's also what makes it worth it. Now, a year after I finished it, it's still like I can think about certain people in this novel and just think about how are they doing. And I really need to read the second novel in this series, but it might be painful, so we'll see. So these were my 10 favorite Nordic novels so far. If you have suggestions for other Nordic novels I should read, please comment them below, especially Danish books, because there were no Danish books on this list. Neither were there any Finnish books, so please comment below. And I hope you have a terrific day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!